All right, so we are joined today by Dr. Danielle N. Boaz, who is an associate professor of Africana Studies at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where she offers courses on human rights, social justice, and the law. Dr. Boaz is the author of Banning Black Gods, Law and Religions of the African Diaspora, and Voodoo, the History of a Racial Slur. Her website, religiousracism.org, tracks cases of discrimination and violence against religious communities in North America and Brazil. Dr. Boaz is also co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Africana Religions. And we're also here today with Gustavo Melo Cerqueira, who is Babalorisha of Ile Ashe Omio Gunsiwaju, located in the rural area of São Feliz in Brazil. Gustavo is also an actor, performer, and human rights defender. He has a bachelor's degree in law from the Federal University of Bahia in Brazil and a PhD in African and African diaspora studies from the University of Texas at Austin. As a human rights defender, Gustavo has battled religious racism in partnership with scholars such as Dr. Boaz and organizations such as Criolla, Ileache, Omio and the Institute for Race Equality and Human Rights. Gustavo has also participated in several acts of political incidents at the United Nations and the Organization of American States, positioning the issue of religious racism against Afro-Brazilian religions as a central matter in the discussions about human rights. All right, I will leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Dr. Boaz. Thanks everyone who's here so that we can have this short conversation about religious racism in Brazil and also about the material that has been produced by Dr. Boaz in terms of the reports of those several cases and some critical analysis of lots of things that are happening. So one of the things that I'm going to do first is that I'm going to share a window with you all and so that we can have some illustration, let's say so, to talk about. Two things I'd like to approach in this discussion in these few minutes I'm gonna have with you right now. One of them is the very idea of the religious races, which is gonna be the second topic. And the first topic actually is going to be talking a little bit about the most recent context we have in Brazil regarding religious races. Okay, so before we go to the definition of religious races, this is one of the news we had recently, and it talks about the organizer of the Jesus Parade here in Brazil, and it happened this year in June 2023. And the organization of this parade is now being accused of religious racism or religious intolerance, as some people say, and we're going to explain a little bit the difference about that. Because one of the phrases that he did during the Jesus Parade is that he was really happy with everything that was happening and really happy with the number of evangelicals and number of Christians who were just following the parade, because a few years or a few decades earlier, or before this parade, he was asking one of his companions, what kind of country do you want? Do you want a country of people who are Christians, or do you want a country of people who do macumba? And we're going to explain this a little bit later about this expression of macumba, but it's kind of a way of saying in a very degrading way that refer to something like witchcraft. And lots of people talk about macumba, talking specifically about the rituals of Afro-Brazilian people or the Afro-Brazilian religion, right? So this happened this year, June 2023. Another thing that happened very, very recently, and this was past month, is this video that I'm gonna show just a small part for you guys. I don't know if you can listen to it. If you cannot, please let me know that I stopped sharing, and I'm gonna try it again, okay? This is a pastor from Rio Grande do Sul, which is in the southern of Brazil. this southern part of Brazil, and he says very interesting things. And I'm gonna translate this for you. No listening? No? Okay, so I think I need to stop sharing and then I need to share with the sound. I'm gonna try to do this, okay? Just to make sure that you can also see how share sound, okay? The intensity of his words as well. Okay, can you see? Yeah? All right, so let me step back a little bit.
Entenda você que está aqui, os demônios sempre farão promessas para você. Os demônios fazem promessas, em primeiro, promessas de poder. Ah, se eu fizer tal coisa, se eu fizer tal trabalho, Umbanda, batuque, é demônio. Ai, mas...
So first thing he says that, oh, you need to understand what the devils are going to do for you. They promise a lot of things. They promise you power. They promise you work, and they want to do things for them. So as soon as he finishes saying that, he affirms that Umbanda, which is also an Afro-Brazilian religion, Batuque, which is also an Afro-Brazilian religion, especially in this state where he's talking, where he speaks from, which is Rio Grande do Sul, he's saying that these religions are the devil, demônio, are the devil.
Mas isso é por questão racial, não!
And then he says, oh, okay, you're going to say this is for a racial matter. And he says, no, the problem is that, and that's what's written over there, that the Afro religions are satanic, are the evil.
Religiões afro são satânicas. Budismo, demoníaco. Islamismo, demoníaco.
And then he goes to other religions. And I would say that for the structure of his speech, he was really attacking Candomblé and Umbanda and Batuque. And then for people not saying that he was being racist, he goes to say that, okay, but Buddhism is also satanic and Islam is also satanic, as if he was not being racist as well.
Adora demônio. Allah é demônio.
And he says specifically, Allah is a devil.
Exu, Ogum, o que seja, são demônios.
So Exu, Ogum, whatever it is, they are the devil.
Podemos voltar com as pregações dos anos 90?
And so he claims in a very nostalgic way that they should go back to the speech they usually have in the church back in the 1990s, right? A few decades ago, as if the recent years for the political correctness and all that stuff, and also the individual rights and the identity politics has suppressed their freedom to speak freely about their own beliefs and how they feel about other religions and things like that. And it's not by chance that the church of this pastor is named Vintage Church, which is a word that has to do with times from the past that bring the best of a particular era, right? And I'd like to share another thing with you all. So these recent cases, I'm calling attention to them because this is the kind of thing that we are seeing in Brazil growing a lot in recent years. So I'm talking here about 2023, 21st century, and we still face this kind of discrimination of people against our religions. But although we have faced this along our whole history here in Brazil, in recent years, this has intensified a lot. I usually locate in 2014, 2007, between 2014 and 2017, the years where this kind of discrimination grows a lot. In 2015, for example, is the year that the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God forms a kind of a militia that is named Os Gladiadores do Altar. I never know how to translate that into English, but I'm pretty sure that Dr. Boaz can help me with this.
It's the Gladiators of the Altar.
Okay, so the Gladiators of the Altar. And as you can see through their performance, you can see that they are very, very, I mean, they can remind you of some of our historic events, right?
Atenção, gladiadores, em continência, tempo 1. Gladiadores, o que é que vocês querem? Volta, volta, volta!
And it's really, really shocking that they had this kind of position, this kind of gesture. They're pointing their fingers to the altar, but of course that reminds us of things that are completely, not completely different. I think that in this performance, we can see expressed what kind of country, what kind of society they want. And why am I locating this period here, this year of 2015? Because that's also the time when several acts of violence against Candomblé terreiros have increased a lot. As, for example, those terreiros that were destroyed and burned down at the federal district here in Brazil, or which is the area of the capital of our country. So several Candomblé terreiros around the capital of Brazil were destroyed and burned down exactly in 2015 when we have this militia operating. I'm not saying that these were the ones who burned down these terreiros. I cannot say this. There are not proof or evidence of this. What I'm saying is that there is an environment that is being created by this kind of initiative and this kind of discourse in Brazil that kind of legitimizes the violence against Afro-Brazilian religions, against people from Afro-Brazilian religions. That's the main point. It's not a matter of saying if these gladiators did this or not. The point is that the violence increases almost at the same time that this kind of performance becomes common in the universal church of the kingdom of God, and not only in Brazil, in several other countries in Latin America. And that's something we need to pay attention. What is the project of power that these people are having? Get out, okay. So when we get to 2017, we have another wave of violence, but this time, and it's really interesting because in 2015, we are talking about at a moment when these more radical evangelicals, especially those from the universal church, but also from different affiliations, they also get the power, institutional power. They go to the state power. They become congressmen, congresswomen. They become governors. They go to different city halls in different cities in Brazil. In 2017, for example, that's the year where the new city. I don't know how to say that. Help me again, Dr. Boaz. Prefeitos.
You're talking about the city council, I believe.
Not city council, but the mayor.
Oh, the mayor, yeah.
Yes. So we got in 2017, several mayors, they got to the power because of the period of election and everything here in Brazil. So 2017 is the year that all the cities had new mayors or the old mayors with new mandates. Several cities issued a statement saying that from that moment on, those cities would belong to Jesus Christ. And they would not accept any kind of devilish rituals or codes or anything. And every time they say those things in Brazil, they are referring to Afro-Brazilian religion. We like it or not, every time they refer to that, they are referring to Afro-Brazilian religions. In that same year, and that's so interesting because they get to the power of institutional ways, but at the same time, that's the moment when drug traffickers, a lot of them, start also to rule about religion in the areas where they rule about drugs and violence. So they start ruling about, they intensify their ruling about religions as well. So they start to expel people from Afro-Brazilian religions from their houses. They start to burn and destroy their houses as well. That happens a lot in Nova Iguaçu, and it was specifically by a command that was, the name is Terceiro Comando Puro, that was the main one to do this kind of violence, but not the only one. And that was 2017, right? When we get to 2019, but we have an intensification of the territories of these traditional communities in rural areas, not in urban areas anymore, but also in rural areas being also threatened, as is the case of the Ilha Simimó, which is a place that some of us know here in Brazil, and it's pretty close to the place that I also I'm a leader in São Felix, and we have lots of different companies threatening the spaces of those communities. So what I'm talking about, bringing those examples for you, and we're going to have time to discuss as soon as we open this, is that when we talk about religious races, we need to consider not only the intentions or religious motivations of violence that affect those Afro-Brazilian religious communities, but also there are other forms of violence that are inflicted against those communities. And even though they are not clearly motivated by religious aspects, they are threatening more frequently those communities. This is the case, for example, the Leache that a paper industry is invading their territory and burning things down and breaking their religious spaces, including natural spaces, but also some of the ritual spaces. And as is the case as well of Mãe Bernadette, who was killed a month or a couple of months ago in Bahia. And she was not killed probably by a particular specific religious motive. But anyways, she's also within the dispute of territories in different that happen in different areas in Brazil. And she was a leader. She was a voice against this kind of violence. She was a voice to defend her people and her territory. And she was killed in a very, very pervasive way. This woman, she was killed with 12 bullets in her head. 12 shots to her head and 8 shots to her body. 20 shots because of her political struggle. And she was also a religious leader for us. So this does not mean that we are not doing nothing about that. We're just complaining this way. There are many forms we are reacting against that. We are reacting against that in terms of culture, for example, is the case of samba schools that go and have those themes about Afro-Brazilian religions, and lots of people give support to that, as well as we also go through those international organizations so that we can make some demands about that, as was the case of this committee that I could participate at the United Nations last year, that we are also denouncing and reporting some of those cases. And there was a report, the final report of this committee, which is a committee against racial discrimination, was a report that for the first time in the United Nations history could include something very specific about religious racism, something very specific about the kind of violence that people from Afro-Brazilian religion are suffering here in Brazil and the protection the state should give us. That was the first time they included that. And it was because of the organization we could do with several other organizations like these that I mentioned here in this card, but also because, yes, these cases are increasing a lot. And we need to call international attention to what's happening so that we can put some pressure in Brazilian state to solve this situation of religious racism that we have in Brazil, which, again, is not only about the violence that is religiously motivated, but also the violence that constantly and consistently affect Afro-Brazilian religious communities. Well, this is pretty much what I'd like to share with you today. And I'm gonna pass the word to Dr. Boaz, who's gonna talk more specifically about the report and things that this has been doing in that time. And I'd like also to get this opportunity, Dr. Boaz, to thank you for all the work you have done. Many of the reports that I sent to the United Nations and also to the Organization of American States come from the reports that you are building and constructing. And I am happy to partner with you in all that endeavor that you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Baba Gustavo, for those kind words and that quick introduction. So to just kind of explain a little bit about the genesis of this project and then explain the project itself. So all of these events that Baba Gustavo was talking about in particular, the drug traffickers that were attacking Afro-Brazilian religious communities, this really was circulating a lot in the media in 2017, and Baba Gustavo at the time was finishing his PhD in the United States. And through a mutual friend, we were connected, and he started to educate me, who I have worked for gosh, many, many years, long over a decade, well over a decade, on discrimination and violence against African diaspora religious communities. And even I had no idea about what exactly was happening in Brazil. And so over the course of the last 5 years or so, we've been talking, and I've made several trips to Brazil and just learned a lot more about really what is a very dire situation there, what's a very extreme scenario there. And I would say that my ignorance on this fact is what led to the creation of the materials that we're here to talk to you about today, which started in the project started in 2019. And I just started to collect news reports, social media reports, these kinds of things, personal stories about incidents of religious racism that were happening in Brazil. And what I realized was that there aren't a lot of specific databases, specific materials that people could refer to, both outside of Brazil to understand what's happening there, but also within Brazil to affirm what people already know is happening there. There aren't a lot of projects that are really showing the breadth of the situation. And so that was my goal in 2019, was to collect a large number of cases, as many as I could kind of get my hands on, and to start analyzing the data about them. And so that's when this project was born. And I'll start sharing with you the website where all this information that we're talking about today is displayed. So so I formed this organization, which I am the president of. Baba Gustavo is the vice president. It's called the International Commission to Combat Religious Racism. And our first project was this project focused on Brazil. And so in 2019, I published the first version of the materials that we're talking about today, which includes a map of cases of religious racism, and then just what at this point is an Excel spreadsheet showing these cases, and then a report that is about 50 pages plus an introduction which analyzes some of these materials. And these tools, they are meant to create a single space where people can go and view kind of a broader sense, get a broader sense of what's happening. So I want to walk you through what this information is. And of course, we have a very concise definition of religious racism and some background about the creation of the report. And then, as I said, we have these materials together, and where I should really highlight that Baba Gustavo has been so instrumental is in helping me verify, because Portuguese is definitely not my first language, and helping me verify that the information that I put together is correct. And then also, we recently last year updated what was initially 300 cases that I had put together of religious racism in Brazil, and now we are displaying 500 cases, and we have all of the materials in Portuguese and English. And so what started out initially as just a project that was a passion project, I wanted to have this centralized data available, has become a very collaborative project. And I'm very grateful to Baba Gustavo for the work that he's done on this. So as I said, there are these three sets of information available: the report that analyzes the data, the Excel spreadsheet that shows us the data, and then the interactive maps. And we have maps that go by the date of the cases organized by year. And then we also have a map that shows the information by type of religious racism. And so the page that I'm showing you right now, the religiousracism.org/Brazil, spelled with a Z, is going to take you to all of the information in English. And then we have another page that is racism.org/Brazil spelled with an S. And that will take you to all of the same information, but in Portuguese. So let me walk you through a little bit of what this information looks like. I'm actually going to start with the map. Okay, so you can see it. This is the map that shows the information by the type of religious racism, and I have highlighted here. So we lump together the different types of religious racism into various categories based on what are the most common types of attacks. Violence against people would encompass things like stabbing, shooting at people, and other kinds of physical assaults. Crimes against person and property would be things like robbery that both involve a threat to a person's life and also some kind of an invasion of their property or their temple space. And then there's a wide range of things that fall under cases like verbal and virtual harassment. One of the things that has just been kind of astonishing to me is how many incidents that we found where evangelical churches in Brazil will go and have what they would call kind of like a prayer vigil, or some kind of a ceremony right outside of an Afro-Brazilian temple, which, as Baba Gustavo has explained, is called a terreiro. And they will pray for God to destroy this space that they think is the space of the devil. And so these are the kinds of things that we're calling sort of verbal harassment, even though it really obviously goes a lot further than that. There are various issues with interference with the legal rights of devotees that we talk about in these materials. So among these would be, for example, a problem that has become very, very serious in the past few years, especially since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is that people who are devotees of Afro-Brazilian religions, especially, I think we're seeing a lot more with Candomblé than with others. They're having their children removed from their custody primarily or solely because of their affiliation with Afro-Brazilian religions, or because they involve their children in some kind of a ceremony that then someone who has prejudicial views of these religions is saying, well, this isn't safe for the child, and so the authorities are coming in and interfering with the devotees' custody rights. And then we have crimes against property broken down into a number of different subtopics, because this is by far the most common thing that's happening right now. We have property destruction, just generally, attacks against statues and monuments, and stoning. So stoning is pretty self-explanatory, although that might seem a little, and then arson as well, I'm sorry. So Baba Gustavo already mentioned the cases of arson that occurred in the capital in 2015. There were, in a span of about 6 months, there were, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 13 incidents where terreiros just in the capital city of Brasilia and surrounding areas were set on fire. And so arson is a huge problem and has been in recent years. And then we also separated out stoning, which to me, when I first was learning about this, seemed like such an astonishing thing, but people are attacking Afro-Brazilian religious communities by launching large stones again at the temples, usually while people are having ceremonies. And so this is tracked out as a different kind of attack. And then there's a lot of destruction of statues and monuments honoring either the orishas, which are kind of these divinities, higher beings that are honored in a number of different Afro-Brazilian religions, or there are actually statues, monuments, busts to religious leaders. And both of these have been under attack, in particular in recent years. Last year, there was a statue of a very prominent Candomblé leader in the city of Salvador that was set on fire. And this is, I think, the second or third time that the statue has been attacked, vandalized, set on fire since 2019 when it was installed. So you can see that this is a pretty dramatic thing. And then property destruction, which is kind of the catch-all phrase for the rest of these things, that will pull up any kind of cases where people are invading temples and they are destroying different sacred objects, and sometimes also destroying other parts of the tejero of the temple where just kind of quasi-secular things are going on, like in a kitchen or something of that nature. And yeah, so what this particular map allows you to do is select, as I have here with the crimes against property / arson, select out the different kinds of things that you'd like to take a look at. And you can see with the little icons where things are occurring. And you can see, for instance, the cases that we talked about in Brasilia, this concentration in 2015. You can see all of the cases of arson that occurred there. So the other interactive map, just to jump over to this, is going to be organized by date. And Google Maps, unfortunately, only allows you to have so many different layers to a map. So we've put out the most recent years in individual years, which works out well because there have been so many more cases recorded recently. But we have those labeled out in individual years, and then the earlier cases from 2000 to 2010 and 2011 to 2015 are lumped together a little bit more. So what you can do with these cases is each one you can, and this is also true of the map that is organized by type of intolerance or type of religious racism, I apologize. You can go to any particular entry and you can click on it and it will give you the basic information about what has happened in that case. And so we have, again, all of this information available in English and Portuguese. Hopefully in the future, other languages are coming. But so we have a description, a label for the type of religious racism, the basic information about the date, the city and state, the name of the victim and the perpetrator, and then a short description of what happened. Where applicable, we have also included, linked in some videos or some photos. So you can see here, this is a case where there was a tejero that the police came in and they invaded it and they fired several shots. And so there were pictures made available of the attack there. And we have included that in the entries there. So people are able to kind of peruse through these different entries and gain a little bit more information. But actually, all of this information is available on the Excel sheet that is also on the website. So I'm just going to go directly to the Excel sheet, but just know that when you go to that page, religiousracism.org/Brazil, it will, when you click on the link, it will just download the Excel spreadsheet, and then you'll be able to navigate this as I'm doing now. And the other thing that I want to make clear, just to help with the kind of ease of use of this, is that it's necessary to click on enable editing in order to do some of the things that I'm going to do right now. So we have quite a bit of information that we've made available on this spreadsheet. And I wish I had time to go into all of the reasons why we decided to organize things in this way. But I think a couple of things are worth noting. Of course, organizing things by city and state has been very important in helping us track where cases of religious racism are occurring, what seem to be more common sites than others. And so one of the things that you could do, for example, on the spreadsheet is click on the down arrow by state, and you could select which ones you would like to choose. So if I deselect, select all, and then I just want to look at the cases that happened in the state of Bahia, it will pull those up for me, and I can see automatically how many cases, in this case, 87 cases from the state of Bahia. So it will tell me how many cases occurred there. And I can see if I were going to look at, for example, the northern area of the country, I could select multiple states and find out what's happening there. That's also, incidentally, information that we provide in the report. And then we also thought it was important to track some information about the victims or targets of religious racism, as well as the religious leaders. As Baba Gustavo was mentioning, there is a serious issue with evangelical churches in Brazil, not all of them, of course, but some of them, committing acts of religious racism against Afro-Brazilian religious communities. And so we thought it was important to track how many cases can we actually identify what the religion of the perpetrator was. And of that, it's worth noting that in 100% of the cases where it was possible to identify the religion of the perpetrator, they were some form of Christians. And then I think there was one case where the person was Catholic, and then every other case was able to be traced back to evangelical Christians, where the perpetrator's religion was known and the perpetrator was identified. Other things that we're trying to track out is thinking more about the gender of the person committing the act of religious racism, as well as the gender of the person who is the victim. Now, this is one of the things that's a little bit complicated about the information that we've provided. So, and this is something that I'm very appreciative. Baba Gustavo helped me work this out quite a bit, because I think I had a bit of the wrong information on some of these in the initial incarnation of this. But so in some cases, it's not just an individual who's being attacked, right? It's an entire religious community. And so what we've done here is try to identify who is the Babalarisha, Yalarisha, who is the religious leader of this particular community. And then we have listed them, their gender, as the gender of the victim or religious leader. And the hope is to gain an understanding of who exactly is being targeted, and if there's a gendered nature to the attackers as well. Is it more people who are identified as men who are attacking religious communities led by women, or vice versa, or what kind of a circumstance we're seeing? And then another important thing that we have listed here is the age of the victim or religious leader. And again, in this case, where the victim is an entire community, we've done this based on the age of the leader of the community. These are organized by the 10-year brackets, 0 to 10 years old, 11 to 20, and so on. And then you'll see that there are some that have multiple, more than 2 or 3 ages, or some where the ages of the victims are unknown. But what this does is it helps us to understand one of the theories that people have had, and I think I'm not mistaken in saying that both Baba Gustavo and I had this impression that a lot of women who are, I would say, aged 60 or above, who are leaders of Afro-Brazilian religious communities, that they might be the ones who are targeted more frequently, or that they are targeted more frequently in particular types of cases of religious racism. And so this is the kind of data that allows us to search those things and verify that information. And then I think the other thing that I would like to point out, well, 2 quick things. One of them is the location of the attack. And this is something that it kind of corresponds with some of the things that the federal government of Brazil does in some national reports about religious intolerance, which covers all communities, but it just gives very general data. So for instance, I can't look at the reports they provide and say, how many cases of intolerance or religious racism against Candomblé happened in an actual Candomblé temple. Like I can't break things down in that way, which with our report, our information here, you can. Instead, it would just provide information in general, nationally about, okay, how many cases of religious intolerance are happening in schools? How many are happening in the victim's home, I think is one of the categories. And so we've tried to be a little more specific for one thing, but also to give people the opportunity to have the raw data here to look at, okay, I've narrowed things down and I've said, okay, I want to look at the religion of the victim is Candomblé. And then I want to know how many attacks are happening in an airport, in a court, or some kind of judicial space, in the victim's home, in the victim's place of worship. And so we've identified those things. And this is really, really important because it has shown us that the vast majority of cases are happening in the victim's place of worship, in the Afro-Brazilian temple or center. And then the other thing that I think is really important, the data that we've provided here, is the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. And this varies a lot. We've tried to create some different categories here. If I scroll down, you'll see a lot of them are unknown, and that's usually because the perpetrator is unknown. But we have some cases here, for example, where some of the perpetrators are these drug traffickers. And so the relationship is the person lives in the community controlled by the trafficker. There are some cases where the victim is a citizen and the perpetrator is the police. And then there are some cases where we have like students, professors, we have family members, employer-employee kind of relationships. So we have information that breaks all of that kind of stuff down. And I just want to note that right now, just my technological capabilities have allowed us to put this in an Excel sheet and publish that. But we are in the process of creating a database that will actually be embedded on the website and searchable. My goal is to still have this Excel sheet available for download for people who can navigate that a little easier, for people who find that a little bit of a simpler route to kind of identify things, or people who've just become familiar with that. But the goal, the plan is to have that up, a searchable database in, I would say, the next, definitely the next year, but probably closer to the next 6 months. And then the last thing that I'll show you very quickly so that we can have at least 10 minutes or so for questions if need be, is the report that we've made. And the report itself, minus the introductory materials, is about 50 pages. And then Baba Gustavo made a very wonderful, insightful introduction to this new report that gives us some of the context that he gave all of you in the beginning of this webinar. And then what we have here is just some of the data. I'm just going to scroll past the introduction. Some of the data about religious racism, what kinds of cases we're seeing, and also some of the terminology. So if you're confused by any of the information that we've given in this webinar so far, I mean, we've thrown out a lot of terms here: Babalarisha, Candomblé, Macumba. So this will clarify Tejero. This will clarify what some of those terms are in the most basic sense. And then we go into the kind of data that we're seeing. We talk about some of the information that was coming out from the federal government of Brazil and why that kind of demonstrated that not only are we seeing these kind of sensational news stories that are talking about cases of arson, cases of drug traffickers, cases of armies being formed in these evangelical churches, but we're actually seeing data that's suggesting a sharp increase in cases of attacks, of violence and discrimination against Afro-Brazilian religions that, again, are going back to that 2015 mark that Baba Gustavo was identifying. And so we go through and we talk about what data we can get from the federal government's information. And then we launch into, well, this is the information that we have on our site. So this is analyzing the data that you see in that spreadsheet. And I'm not going to go through all of this because thankfully you have the opportunity to read this for yourself, but I just wanted to show that we do take some of this information, for example, the types of religious racism, and we put them into charts that are easier to understand. So you can see here that of the 500 cases that we have on the website in this set of materials, 40 are cases of arson or attempted arson, 19 are murder or attempted murder, and then a bunch of a variety of other different kinds of cases. And then in the rest of the report, we break down some data on the different types, the categories that I talked to you about when I was showing you the various categories on the maps. And then we give some examples of some of the more egregious, some of the more outrageous types of attacks that we've seen, include some of the photos and videos that are also embedded in the map, but just to make them kind of easily accessible. And through all of this, and I forgot to mention this about the spreadsheet, so through all of this, you do see the sources for everything. So in this report, we give you the information for what is the corresponding case number in the spreadsheet. And also when we include photos and videos, we have the source information, the website that we got it from, or the social media post, or the government report, or what have you. And I think the very last thing that I'll point out, so that we still have 10 minutes at the end of this, is, one thing that I did want to say is that when there are videos embedded in this, so you can click on, I think you might, again, have to download the report to do so, but you can click on the report, and if it's, for instance, on YouTube, it will take you to the YouTube link. You also have the source right here next to it, so you can click on the video as well. The last thing that I just wanted to highlight was just that we've put this information into a map at the end of the report that shows the location of where the cases are occurring, kind of breaks things down, shows you the category of the different regions of Brazil and the number of cases that are coming out of each space. So again, you can view that on the spreadsheet, but it's also kind of some of the more important details, I think, are kind of neatly given to you here in the report. So I think that that's all that we have for you. Again, I'll say that this is all available on the website, www.religiousracism.org/Brazil, and emphasize again that we have all of this information. You can see at the top here that you click on the link as well and find it all in Portuguese. And we're constantly in the process of trying to update the data, adding more cases as they occur, and also to just make this more user-friendly. But right now, I hope that this provides a basic introduction, a tool for people who want to understand more about cases of discrimination and violence against Afro-Brazilian religions. I think that this is a great resource, and it's one of the few things that's available in English. So I hope that people will be able to use it in classrooms or just to reach the public about what's going on. Thank you.